The crowd that Judas led had come with the chief priests and elders to where the Lord Jesus was on the Mount of Olives, and the Lord Jesus allowed them to arrest him. We now read Luke chapter 22, verses 54 to 62. Then they seized him and led him away, bringing him into the high priest's house, and Peter was following at a distance. And when they kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat down among them. Then a servant girl, seeing him as he sat in the light and looking closely at him, said, "This man also was with him." But he denied it, saying, "Woman, I do not know him." And a little later, someone else saw him and said, "You also are one of them." But Peter said, "Man, I'm not." And after an interval of about an hour, still another insisted, saying, "Certainly this man also was with him, for he too is a Galilean." But Peter said, "Man, I do not know what you're talking about." And immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And Peter remembered the saying of the Lord, how he'd said to him, "Before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly. So they led Jesus away and took him to the high priest's house. The high priest was the leader of the priests and had important duties under the law that God had given to the Israelites. The high priest at that time was a man named Caiaphas. Peter realized now that Jesus was not going to fight, nor did he want his disciples to fight, but he was in fact allowing the chief priests and elders to take him. Peter decided to follow and see what happened. He followed at a distance. He didn't really want to be recognized as a disciple of the Lord Jesus. He got into the courtyard of the high priest's house and mingled with the people there. It was cold, and the servants and officers started a fire in the courtyard. Peter felt the cold too, and he sat by the fire with them. And a servant girl recognized him. "This man also was with him," she said, but Peter denied this. No, he didn't know Jesus. A second person recognized him. "You also are one of them," he said. Peter again said no. He then had time to think. He watches what the leaders are saying and doing to his Lord. He hears the lies they're telling. He sees the humiliation and suffering that Jesus is enduring. Would Peter stand up and say, "I'm one of his disciples. I know that he's the Messiah sent by God to us"? Would he? He didn't. He probably had a little conversation with those around the fire, and an hour passed since the last accusation that he was one of Jesus' disciples. This, in fact, gave Peter time to think about what he just said, but he doesn't seem to have done so. And after an hour had passed, someone who heard him speak recognized his accent. He realized that Peter came from the Galilee area. He had a Galilee accent. The Lord Jesus had lived in the Galilee area nearly all his life, and almost all of his followers came from that region. Peter, in fact, came from a town on the northern shores of the Sea of Galilee. The people of Jerusalem thought that those from Galilee were inferior, less well-educated, less sophisticated. So the man was right. He correctly deduced that Peter was one of Jesus' disciples. "I don't know what you're talking about," Peter replied. Immediately a rooster crowed, and the Lord Jesus turned and looked directly at Peter. The word used here, translated "look" in English, is an unusual word. It means a deliberate and penetrating look. And that's what the Lord Jesus gave Simon Peter. And Peter saw it. And he remembered what the Lord Jesus had said to him just a few hours before. And Peter hadn't really believed Jesus when he'd said it to him. "Before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times, the Lord had said to him. And that is what had just happened. He had denied his Lord 3 times. exactly as Jesus had said. On the Mount of Olives, a few hours before, the Lord Jesus had urged all the disciples to pray that they would not give way to temptation. Peter hadn't been praying, he'd been sleeping, and now he had given way. He denied his Lord, the one he loved, and he went out and wept bitterly. Here's something for us to think about. Peter was under great pressure, very great pressure. He didn't want to suffer in the same way that his Lord was suffering, so he denied that he knew him. Would we have done the same?